If you look at the bill, and Professor Tan asked this question very cogently, it's a public order bill. But the two problems we have here is, firstly, we haven't ascertained the cause of the riot. The Prime Minister and his colleagues might like to articulate the point that it's alcohol. What's interesting is that when you look at riots in other parts of the world, there was a riot in London in 2011. Before anything could happen, exactly like our Prime Minister, their Prime Minister said it was a drunken riot. Very interestingly, even the timing was almost the same, less than 24 hours. So of course it's in the Prime Minister's interest to say it's nothing to do with our welfare policy, our labour policy, it's purely a drunken mob. So that's the first issue. The second issue is, Professor Tan brought up 3 acts which are public order oriented. In fact, from my limited research, and of course I don't carry the credentials of Professor Tan, but from my layman's research, there are 14 acts that have public order implications. And all the provisions of this bill before the House are contained in those 14 acts. So if you look at the speech that Teo Chee Hean made in Parliament, and then secondly when Shanmugam was asked to comment on the bill outside of Parliament, they gave 3 reasons. One, the other laws are too strong. I've never heard of a law being brought in because other laws were too strong. If they're too strong, then they already provide the reasoning that the less strong bill is supposed to achieve, right? That's the first thing. Secondly, you said the other laws are too wide. Now that doesn't make sense either. If they're too wide, that means they already cover the needs that have been thrown up by the Little India. The third reason he gave was that this is boring and interesting at the same time. It tends to echo what Denise Poh said, or Cynthia Poh, whichever of the sisters is in Parliament. Right, Denise Poh. The other acts are not specific to large concentrations of South Asians. And this was said by Shanmugam, South Asian himself. Essentially, he's saying you get too many Indians together, you must have a specific bill for them. This is it's said so. It was reported in Today. I'm not making this up. Very, very worrying. So, okay, so we take these 2 points, right? Firstly, the law already exists. Secondly, we don't know that alcohol is the problem. So then we need to ask, why another bill? So presumably we need to read between the lines. So my reading between the lines of this bill, the interesting point is that they give phenomenal powers to the minister, the police, and the auxiliary police as well. Powers that cannot be challenged in court. There's clause 19C, which says that none of the activities, I can actually read it, I have it on my phone because it's so alarming, none of the no liability shall be incurred by the government because of the enactment of this act, or for anything which is done or intended to be done in good faith and with reasonable care in the exercise or purported exercise of the powers or the performance or purported performance of any function or duty under this act. So that means anything the government does or purports to do or intends to do cannot be challenged under the law, which is worrying because if you look at all the powers to strip search, to prevent someone coming in, and bear in mind the police and auxiliary police can stop you on the spot from coming in for 24 hours, and the commissioner can stop you for 30 days. And you cannot challenge this in court. And you also don't have the right to tell the policeman, no, stop, I have to go in because my mother is ill and I have to go pick up from a restaurant or whatever. You don't have that right, usually. So there's that problem of lots of discretionary powers. In fact, all the powers are discretionary, and then no right to challenge them in court. Now, when you have these discretionary powers, the other problem that arises, I presume, as a layperson, is that the standard of evidence goes down. Professor Tan would be able to speak more carefully about this, or more clearly about this, but I'm assuming a policeman on the ground doesn't have the same knowledge or finely tuned knowledge of reasonableness or of evidence that a lawyer would have or a judge would have. And because we cannot then challenge those actions in court, it means that, you know, in general, the standard of evidence required for administrative behavior goes down, if you see what I mean. So, if you look at it from that point of view, we are impacting on the entire legal framework. We're impacting on, you see, the law of evidence is a great protection we have, right? you cannot just arbitrarily say someone has done something. You must adduce evidence, and that evidence is based on serious principles of evidence that have developed over centuries, not on the ground in 10 minutes when an auxiliary policeman, makes his judgment. So, for me, the problem is the kind of, not so much the provisions of the law, worrying though those are, but also of the normalization of the limitations of our civil rights that this law kind of implies. And if you think, the Act will only be for 1 year, but we have 2 other acts in Singapore which are also renewable, right? The Criminal Law Temporary Provisions Act and the Internal Security Act. They were made for specific purpose at the time when they were made. They've been on the book for now 60 years, right? Each time when you have a parliament that is, so filled with PAP MPs, then you're going to have, a parliament doesn't become a safeguard. Final point I'll make is in relation to, not all the powers of the Act are contained in Little India. The stop and search of vehicles and the ability to enter vehicles, seize vehicles, enter into homes without a warrant is anywhere in Singapore. It's not only in Little India. So that becomes boring. So, and it doesn't have to be in relation to an alcohol-related problem, you see. So a policeman who is a close friend of Toh Chee Hen and not a very close friend of mine, by definition, would be allowed to come into my house purely on suspicion, lower standard of evidence, pure unreasonableness, and then I cannot challenge it in court. So you see the problem that we have here. So I would invite very strongly all of you to read our briefing paper, which is on, where did we publish it? On the Online Citizen. And if you can, go to Parliament at 1:30 next Monday, at least to monitor what's going on in Parliament and see what MPs will say. That's when the bill will be debated. I suspect it won't be Tuesday because Parliament is only sitting for the 1 day. After that is the budget debate, the following Friday, as far as I'm aware. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Kevin, you want to add? No, not really. About anywhere in Singapore?
Well, it's not entirely clear. Thank you very much, Vincent, for adding stuff that's you obviously have been spending a lot more time looking at it than I have, and you're right, there are, well, I don't know if there are 14, but certainly a lot of legislation in Singapore that covers many of the things that's already in here. So really not much else to add except that I'm dying to read your position paper, so I'll do that after this when I get back. Yeah, but I don't know if there's anything that you wanted a particular response from me. You're talking about standard of proof. Well, I think standard of proof is a very tricky thing because we're not talking about courtroom anyway. But you are right in that it's extremely hard to challenge discretion, so long as you don't go beyond the pale. The test is that the act that, or let's take a police officer. The police officer did not act in a way that was so unreasonable that no reasonable police officer could have done that. So, the tricky thing is that, well, there's no such thing as an ultimately reasonable person. There's no such creature. Okay, so when you say the reasonable man or reasonable person, it's not like something you can drag out of the cupboard and say reasonable or not. There's no such thing. So, therefore, in law we accept that among reasonable persons, there are the more reasonable of the reasonable people, and there are also the less reasonable, but all within that penumbra that you would call reasonable, right? And the test would be that you are so unreasonable that not even the most unreasonable of the reasonable people would have done something like this. So you really must be, in essence, you've got to be quite ridiculous, right? That looks so irrational, so ridiculous, and that's the only time you can succeed in a challenge. But if so long as they can show you that there was some reasonableness in it, yeah, I believe Vincent has some alcohol that he's planning to bring in. I've got a little bit of a tip from somebody. His neighbor says he's been accumulating alcohol every day. Okay lah, maybe that might be reasonable suspicion. I mean, sorry, I'm just
It's true, I am a